Start our journey to Batesville, Arkansas for Uncle Ralph's birthday,
90th birthday.
90th birthday.
real similar kind of country. But anyway, we've got a few minutes. Anybody wants to come up and share some stories about your relationship with Ralph?
Make sure they're clean.
He can't run away. He's got that. He's a little slower than he used to be, so he's not going to run away. Oh, we've got some stories. All right, here's. And I think Mom wanted to do a first one. Go first.
Yeah, I want to go first, get mine.
She wants to get hers out of the way.
So I can listen.
She needs to be involved in this one anyway.
Can I lower that mic?
Well, I wanted to tell you all to watch who you marry because you never know what he's going to do to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that I was going to change my name from Anderson to Cross, but I never knew I had to change my first name. Now, you all don't know a thing about my first name, or most of you don't. But in Lone Pine, Pennsylvania, I was born, and my mother said she wanted to name me Phyllis Joanne, and I liked both those names. And Daddy said, nope, you named the last two. I named this one. So I ended up with Wilma Lucille. And most of you don't know that I had a Wilma there. My first name was Wilma. But anyway, we were married maybe 2 weeks, and I got a letter from my best friend, and she wrote, Dear Lucy.
Oh.
And he said, where'd she get that? And I said, she's the only one who is ever allowed to call me Lucy. And you know what he said? We're going to see about that. I said, what's wrong with Wilma? And he said, I have a cousin named Wilma that I don't get along with. And he said, we're in a new place with new people. They don't know your name. Let's just call you Lucy. So he started introducing me as Lucy. And it grew on me too, because I never did like Wilma. But for 18 years, I was Wilma. And for 69 years, I've been Lucy. Except for a 92-year-old sister here, and a 74-year-old baby brother here, and a few nieces and nephews, and they still call me
Wilma.
They've got some of that Anderson stubbornness in them. But, yeah. But anyway, when you're going to get married, you watch it because they might change on your name. You don't know who you're going to be. But that's not the whole story I want to tell you. I want to tell you about how I got even. And this wasn't by choice. But I loved it. Loved every minute of it. We lived in Glenbury, Maryland when the boys all went off to college. And we'd always kidded the kids saying, you know, when you're gone away to college, we're going to move and not tell you where we're moving. Well, when Michael was in his very last year, sure enough, American Airlines said, Ralph, we don't need you in BWI anymore. You need to go someplace where they need full-time people. And I'm kicking and screaming because I don't want to leave Maryland. But we did. For 7 months, he was in Texas, living with my little brother, and I'm in Maryland trying to sell a house. 7 months. But we made it, and I had a dear friend up there who said, she knew I was upset, and she said, now, Lucy, you know, no matter where you go, you're gonna bloom where God plants you. And I have a friend here, sitting right over there, who says the same thing to me all the time. Karen always tells me that. You're gonna bloom where God plants you. Well, we moved to Texas. That, you know, that hot state down there. It has all that kind of wood that I don't like, that I'm allergic to. Yeah, mesquite.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we lived there a little while, and we got in with the Church of Christ there on Park Boulevard, and after a couple of years, they wanted to start a preschool. And we were invited to help do it from the ground up, and I thought, I love kids. And, yep, we'll do that. So we got in with us starting a preschool business, and from the church, and it was wonderful. And it's still going on 35 years later. So we were really proud of what had happened with that school. But as Ralph and I have always done, we're a team. If he's in a shop and needs something, I'm the gopher. You know how that goes. And if I'm in a mess someplace, he'll get me out of it. So we're usually a team. And I taught 4-year-olds for a while, and first year was great. But he worked for American Airlines, and he didn't have weekends off. And he'd be off a couple of days a week, and we always had something that needed done at school. And he'd come up on his days off and just work up a storm. But the second year we started, we were there a week when, lo and behold, the director took a job in public school. And one of the men came to me and he said, "You're the new director." And I said, "No, I'm teaching 4-year-olds. Well, that year I taught 4-year-olds. I had to go take lessons for myself because I was not qualified. And the department down there that comes and inspects you makes you put up this little yellow sign right by your office that says, 'This director is not qualified, but she is working on it.'" So I had me a big time that year. But he came up and made places to put our engineering material and built bookshelves. He drove the bus when we had field trips, and the kids loved him. And this is the part I love. They really did like him. We had 125 students, 3 years, 4 years, and 5-year-olds. And they would really love him when he come. And then I always come running to me and say, "He's coming, he's coming." I said, "Who's coming?" "You know, he's coming." I'd look out in the hall and there was who I thought was Mr. Ralph to them. And they thought he was so special, they gave him another name. And they called him Mr. Lucy. So for the next 12 years, and probably even now, if he ran across somebody, they'd call him Mr. Lucy. They really didn't know he had a different name. And I love that because all my life I've been Mr. Ralph's wife, or Dawn, Randy, and Michael's mother, and here I am. I'm Miss Lucy, but he was Mr. Lucy. So I just want to say happy 90th birthday to my very own Mr. Lucy.
You were too. Okay, so Ron and I have known Ralph and Lucy for many, many years. We actually moved to Searcy in 2003. We continued to come to church here for several years after that, but can't hear. How about now? Okay, so anyway, one of as I got the invitation to the birthday, the 90th birthday celebration, I was thinking about stories that I had to share, and one of the things that I thought about was years ago we used to go on camping trips. The weekend after Labor Day, we went. Several of us went. There each year it seemed like several more people joined that, but one particular time we were there, and Ralph keeps a tidy campsite. So he was out with his leaf blower and he was cleaning his side up, and Lucy was in the trailer cleaning the trailer. Well, Ralph gets up on the trailer and is blowing the leaves off the top of the trailer, and the little pikes that are up there, he blows down in the pipe. Lucy's in the trailer. And so she was in the bathroom.
Okay.
Anyway, the story as she tells it. So she came out, and there's Ralph down on the ground again, blowing leaves. And he sees her and stops and turns to her and she says, "Ralph, sometimes you're a hard man to love."
Totally innocent.
So nobody knew anything about this. Well, the second night we were there, we had a potluck. So we all gather up at one of the campsites and we're having the potluck, and Lucy tells the story. And so everybody just laughs, about what happened. So anyway, I know there weren't supposed to be any gifts, but I made you a set of coasters to remind you of that little event there. So I did that to you. And I know there's lots of other stories. The Lucy 8, I don't know if any of you guys in here have ever had Lucy 8. That's something that...
25 gallon, every
Yeah.
family thing.
Yeah, the recipe for that, do you all have that?
Yeah, we did,
Yeah.
Ralph even
That was
made a
something she
special
kept,
panel for it.
yeah. So anyway, I love you guys both. And Ralph, I'm happy for you and celebrate with you on your 90th birthday. So,
Appreciate you, Chris.
yeah, I love you. Oh, it's a clean camp is a happy camp.
Some of you that don't know me, I am Wilma's and Peggy's little brother. I have only called Wilma Lucy one time, and that, unfortunately, was in front of my mother. She grabbed me by the ear. She said, "I named her Wilma. Her name is Wilma. Don't ever call her Lucy again." To this day, I call her Wilma. But Ralph has been a big influence on a lot of people through his life. Some by the way he lived, some by the way he worked, some by the way he spent his free time. And he's an avid woodworker, and he taught me the basics of woodworking, and I'm still doing woodworking today. So that influence lives on.
Master craftsman.
I learned one thing about Ralph though. When he told you something, he meant it. And if he told you, "Don't you do it," you better not do it. One day he was out washing the car. And so I grabbed the hose. He turned around and looked at me. He said, "Don't you do it." I'm thinking, I'm on the track team. He'll never catch me. So I did it. And I was wrong. It took about 100 yards to catch me, but he caught me. And my reward was a hair shampoo by turning me upside down and putting me in a bucket of soapy water. So I did it.
Right down to the shoulders.
And he has been a big influence on me. My father died when I was 2 years old. So Ralph and my other brother-in-law, Jack, had a hand in raising me. Sometimes that hand was on my shoulder, sometimes it was around my neck. But he had an influence in raising me. One of the things I remember early on was I was the ring bearer for their wedding. And it was on a Saturday at 1 o'clock. And I was mad. Because the Lone Ranger comes on TV at 1 o'clock. So Ralph bribed me to skip the Lone Ranger by giving me all the change in his pocket, which I gladly took. Well, on their way back to Keystone Air Force Base, they stopped at a motel for the night. And the particular room they had a vibrating bed. Right? It took a quarter to make that bed vibrate. Guess who had all Ralph's quarters? She's been a big influence on my life, and I thank you for it. My brother-in-law, happy birthday.
I want to hear the dog's tail.
Oh, no.
Oh. He got me in trouble a few times. I built a sandbox for my two sons, 8 foot by 8 foot square, filled it full of sand. And my neighbor had 2 retrievers, and they would come over and use the sandbox as a litter box. My kids would go out and play, and they'd come in, and they're just covered with doggy doo-doo. So Ralph said, I got the solution for that. Go get you some 22 bird shot and shoot the dogs, and they'll never come back. I thought, I don't know about that. So it was one dark night, I went out and sat on the carport. I thought, I'm gonna shoot the side of the sandbox and see how bad it tears up the wood. Well, my aim was a little off. The 2 dogs were in the sandbox. They were dark colored. I shot and hit one of them, and they yelped and they took off to my other neighbors and ran her down. And I never did tell my neighbor that I shot him. But out of that 20 round box, I had 19 shells still left.
And he was so scared, he ran right through the screen door.
I ran in the house and didn't open the screen door. Speaking of doggy doo-doo, I told about your wedding night. My wedding night, we were on the way back to college, stopped for the night, got a hotel room, and when I opened my suitcase, I had a big surprise. Right there on top of my clothes was a big rubber doggy doo-doo. I think that's all I better say.
I'm Tom. I'm Darlene's trainee. We've been married for 47 years. I'm still working on getting it right. So.
But you're not Mr. Darlene.
No, not Mr. Darlene. No, I'm Papaw. So. Anyway, Uncle Ralph, I just wanted to say thank you for all the years that I've been a part of this family, and making me feel like that I'm part of it.
You are.
For the things that you've showed me and the things you've shared with me and given me. And I just wanted to say, if you're ever in a spot where you need some help, I know a friend came earlier up here and was talking about Ralph always being there and helping out and what he did with his free time. And about 27 years ago, we were fortunate enough to get some property in the town that we lived in, and our kids were really small, and
we had planned our new house, and we were building it ourselves, and we got started. As soon as school was out, I jumped in my old truck and headed to the lumber yard to get started, and got everything ready, and we were building, and I was getting ready to put the rafters up, and it's a 2-story and a 12 pitch, if you know what that is, and pretty high, and I was needing a little help, and so I called Uncle Ralph, and my dad was still living then, and they showed up, and we were putting up rafters on the main roof. It was like 20 foot, 2x8, like 20 foot long. Ralph, my dad would hand them up to Ralph, and he was standing on the first level, and then he would slide them up to me at the peak at the top of the house, and then I would nail in the top, and he'd nail in the where it went over the side of the wall where the bird's mouth was. He was the toe nailer that day, and then we had already put the floor decking down and all that before. He ended up getting a bunch of the walls put up on our garage and getting all that done while they were there. But in the process of that, we were on the upper deck and getting ready to start putting up the rafters, and a hailstorm blew in, and I'm talking this size. And he just had a brand new Dakota truck that he bought.
Wow.
He came, and it looked like somebody took a ball peen hammer and just worked it over. It took all the leaves off. But I never paid you back for that. But you were certainly a blessing. It was great to have an opportunity to work with he and my dad, and chiggers. Chiggers is my trigger word for when I get in that spot. That's a long story. I won't go there. But it's a great for me to live in a house that
We help
more
you.
chiggers that my dad and Uncle Ralph helped me build. And that's a special thing about people like that. They make us better. You give us great memories. Thank you.
I don't need a microphone. I'm Karen Weaver, and I go to church with the Crosses ever since they moved back here in 95. And I'll just echo every wonderful things people say about Ralph and Lucy, and everything you say about Ralph, a lot of things you could say about Lucy. Servant's heart, always there to encourage. And when my mom had her surgery, y'all were right there, always there, never tired of giving and serving and loving. And you know, one thing I always think about with Ralph is his booming voice. Don't you love to hear him sing bass? Okay, well, years ago, there was a Wednesday night class. It was a singing class. I believe Danny Garner maybe was teaching it. And so, of course, Ralph was in the singing class, and we were learning new songs and doing so and so. And the song Love One Another, I think that may have been the time we started kind of singing that, Love One, which is beautiful with the 4-part harmony. And I believe fully in my heart that Ralph loves the words of that song and the message of the song, but somehow at the time that arrangement was coming through. Were you in that class? Okay. But somehow the arrangement, I just remember when we were, that song was coming up, Ralph's comment was, that song's just a bunch of gobbledygook. I don't know how you spell gobbledygook, but I will never forget Ralph Cross saying, that's just a bunch of gobbledygook. But you may sing it now. You may sing it with the... He does.
He loves it now.
He loves it now. It just grew on you.
What?
That story, that song just kind of grew on you, didn't it?
Oh yeah.
Love one another.
Love one another.
Yeah. In the beginning, it wasn't so loving, was it? Yeah, yes. Now, yeah, but wonderful guy right there. Great example to everybody. Love you, Ralph.
City, and a bunch of us went down. Their house was pink, and we went to paint this house more pink than it was. And Karen went along, Great trip. Karen wore her overalls, which do not go through the TSA real well. I remember Karen being inside a glass cage, and they're doing a wand on her, and she's looking at us like that. Ralph went along. By the time I got to Mexico City, I think I knew most everything about American Airlines. It would have been the introduction, you know, new employee. I knew all about airlines, and so we had a good time. But we painted, so we could take 2 suitcases. Well, I had 1 suitcase with my clothes and 1 suitcase with paintbrushes and pans and whatnot, and then I was going to put all my souvenirs in it on the way back home. My kids were young. What do they want from Mexico? They want sombreros. So I was going, don't ever wear those sombreros. And you know, I said, I know it. They won't, and they didn't. But I packed. But on the way home, I had my empty suitcase. I'm packing my sombreros, and I had for my wife, I had this ceramic pot. And Ralph's like, now that's going to get broken on the, you know, way back. And I'm like, okay. And we were in our upstairs bedroom, and I was putting my sombreros in there, and I put the pot on there upside down over the sombreros, and I was packing socks and everything else in there. Well, you look like you know what you're doing. So had fun with Ralph going to Mexico. But one other, along with what Karen said, in the nightly singing class, it was a Wednesday night. They wanted everybody, the soprano sit here, the tenor sit over here. So I'm sitting next to Ralph and all the basses. And so they get everybody seated, but then they're going to have the evening announcements. And so they said, okay, there's going to be a gospel meeting this week in Oliphant. If you're from Arkansas, you know how it's kind of silly, Oliphant. Anyhow, Ralph had just moved here. Ralph leans over to me and goes, where's Oliphant? Oh, this is too good. And I looked back at Ralph, I said, it's the first town just past Possum Grave. The only thing Ralph said was, love you, Ralph.
Do with your parents is you learn things. You were taught things. Some things you wish you maybe had learned in a different way. One of the things that I learned from my father early on, I was about 11 or 12 years old. I learned never to say in front of Ralph Cross, I'm bored. I don't have anything to do. Because within 5 minutes, I had a list of things as long as my arm to be done, and I've never had to worry about being bored again the rest of my life. If you ever have had garden plots around your house, flower beds around your house, and you've had the little granite border stones, one of the things you learn is that grass grows better between those stones than any place else in the yard. And one of the things that Dad told me was to make sure that I kept the grass out from between those stones. Needless to say, I was not bored. Another thing I did was I cut grass a lot. It was one of the first things that I was able to do to earn money, and that was a good thing. There was just one thing about that. My customers were very happy with the way I cut their grass and trimmed the grass and swept the grass. But I knew something they did not know. And that is, it didn't matter how happy they were with how good a job I did cutting their grass. If my mom and dad drove by and they were not happy with the way I cut that grass and trimmed that grass and swept it up, guess who was coming back to do it again? That was one of the lessons I learned. I have been told many times that I'm a very hard worker, that I have a tremendous work ethic, that I am focused on doing my job in the best way that I can. And being a nurse, that's a good thing. But I learned that at the knees of Ralph and Lucy Cross. I will tell you one other thing. When you're 35, 36 years old and you're out playing golf with your father, at the golf course they like to put people in foursomes, right? So Dad and I went out to play. We're playing the golf course in Dyersburg, Tennessee. Two other men come up and say, "Can we join you and make this a foursome? We'd like to play with you and your brother." My brother was Ralph Cross. Thank you all so much. Dad, happy birthday.
Of their affection for you. My dad was not that kind of a person. I know that he had a difficult upbringing. His mother died when he was very young. And so the only grandmother I ever knew was our Grandma Cross. That was his stepmother. And so he was shifted a lot of different places. He had uncles, and growing up in West Virginia, hired hands were always short on supply. So he would go stay with this uncle for a while, and that uncle for a while, and this uncle for a while. And they'd always put him to work. I think that's where he got that work ethic, which he passed on to us, sometimes receiving that a little bit less willingly than we wanted. But anyway, he learned to work hard, and I think as a result of that, he was not real outwardly demonstrative. I really didn't remember my dad ever telling me that he loved me growing up, but I knew that. We all played baseball, and he worked for American Airlines and wore his uniform and his patent leather black shoes. And as soon as he got off work, he'd come straight to the ballpark, and there he is, the first base coach or the third base coach in these patent leather shoes, getting all dusty out there, and he'd take off his jacket and his tie and roll up his sleeves. And so he had his own way of showing us that he loved us. He was always involved. And of course, we involved him in things whether he wanted to or not. So we knew that he was handy, and he taught us to be that. So I was the gopher until I went away to college, and Mom became the gopher. But as a result of me being the gopher, I learned how to fix things. I could take things apart really well. I sometimes had parts left over when I was putting it back together, which he'd have to fix sometimes. And he got to have the saying, "You're a little bit too helpful sometimes." But anyway, the gopher job was good. I've learned to do a lot of things. I can do electrical, plumbing, and I can do roofing. We roofed our house before. I can do auto mechanics. And so anyway, a lot of that was great fun. But it was, seeing him on the ball field, and I remember one time we made hand puppets in school, and our teacher said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could do plays now with these hand puppets?" And I stuck my hand up. Oh, my dad could build us a little hand puppet stage because he was handy. And so I came home and said, "Dad, we need you to build a puppet stage." And he's thinking, a little thing on a little box that sits on a table. No, that's not it at all. It's going to be about 8 feet wide and 6 feet tall, and it's going to have a big opening, and they're going to have curtains that draw back and forth. And so anyway, the whole family got in that deal, but that's what we did. We would volunteer Dad because he was handy, and he always came through, amazingly enough. But I say all that part to tell you, he did have a change in life. About 33 years ago, for those of you that may not know, he had a heart attack living down in Grapevine, Texas. And I would say that probably for a lot of people, a near-death experience, but I guess he was kind of close to death, but he had 5-vessel bypass. So we all came down to rally around Dad and be there at the hospital. And Dr. Carter did a great job, because 33 years later, he's still kicking, you know. He came home from the hospital to find that the project he had started, we all finished. And he started enclosing their patio, screens, and we put up, you know, all the ceiling, and we wanted to rehang his swing. So as we put all this ceiling up, there was a nice ceiling joist there. So we drilled holes in that and had these bolts that would screw up into there. So we got this all put together just in time for him to come home from the hospital. So he has a nice place to sit down and relax and recuperate and enjoy getting better from his heart surgery, open heart surgery. So it was a couple days after we'd all left to go back home, and we heard the story about Dad being sitting out on that swing. And as you stuck those bolts up, there were, you had to put a nut on the top of the washer, and we thought we had them in there pretty good and tight. And as it turns out, here's a guy with, you know, open heart surgery. He's only a few days old, and he sits down on that swing, and it came crashing down to the floor. So anyway, what the surgeon didn't do, we almost did for him. We almost did. But he survived a lot of those different things through the years. But the most important thing that I recall is after that heart surgery, he was a different person. Anytime you'd call and talk to him on the phone, you'd never stop the conversation, never hang up without him saying, "I love you." And he's been that way ever since, because I think you begin to realize what you might have lost, and it makes you realize what you have. And that was a great lesson to learn, and a lesson I'll always keep with me. So I'm not that kind of father. I hug my kids and hug them and love them and kiss them, but I learned that from my dad after a heart attack. So anyway, I appreciate that. I always played those advantages the best I could. One of those is you learn from the mistakes of your older brothers, and I never once said to Dad, "I'm bored." I learned right from somebody else. So I'm sure Dad thinks I'm going to tell you the stories about the 3 times he tried to kill me. I'm just going to summarize that by saying he was unsuccessful. But I want to tell another story that just kind of came to mind. So Randy, my next older brother, Randy's sister-in-law is here, and in chatting a little while ago, she mentioned that she had been dean of discipline in a private school. And that just reminded me of a story from my high school days. So we cross boys were stair-stepped. There were 3 years in between each of us. Our junior high was 7 through 9. Our senior high was 10 through 12. So the junior high got 9 years of cross boys, and then the senior high got 9 years of cross boys. And they were always so glad to see the tail end of me, because that was the end of the cross boys. But in coming into my senior year in high school, we had a bit of a changeover in administrators. And it's always the administrators that have to deal with the disciplines. This is where the dean of discipline kicked this off for me. I got home from school one day, and Dad said, "I had a call from the high school today." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, Mr. So-and-so." And this was like the new vice principal, and it's the vice principals that are always the disciplinarians. He said, this was back in the 70s, and we had designated smoking areas on the high school campus, and it seems so foreign now, but we did. He said, yes, he said he caught someone smoking outside of the designated smoking area. And he said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm Michael Cross." And Dad said, I told him, "Well, that's just not right. That's not correct." He said, I hung up, and then I just laughed. And Dad never once asked me if that was me smoking. I'm still not going to tell him. I was so pleased that he never once questioned me about that. But he did share the story with me. It was not me, by the way. But you know, Randy was talking about, you know, that aspect of family life and Dad loving us. That loyalty to me is something that sort of stuck with me. And I'd forgotten that story until Martha mentioned about being dean of discipline. And I'm thinking, You know, a lot of fathers would have just taken a belt to me right then and there for being caught smoking on campus. And he didn't even question it. He just told that administrator flat out, "No, you're wrong." And that was the end of it. Never heard another word. And that administrator, I think I later introduced myself to him so he would know who Michael Cross was. That's my tale. So happy birthday. Happy 90th birthday, Dad. 90 years to the day. So that is a long, long time. All right, thank you all for being here. We're going to do a couple of short singing numbers. So why don't we do that now, and then if anybody else has a story they want to tell, come on up. But I think we're sort of past the time, so we're going to do a couple of barbershop quartet numbers. So come on, bass. And Tom's going to help the bass.
And I would sing bass if I was in voice, and he may have to fill in with me. And I would dearly love for Bill to come up and sing with this quartet. Because he is a fantastic bass, he's a fantastic tenor, he's a fantastic leader, he's just a fantastic man.
Just one word of warning, Bill. We're going to be singing some notes that are not on this page.
I will be too, and some lyrics from on this page. I'll hang on to two of you. Okay.
We're going to sing the first page through twice. Don't flip it over.
Okay.
My Eveline, say you'll be mine. Won't you come and let me whisper in your ear? Way down yonder in the old cornfield, for you I pine. Sweeter than the honey to the honeybee. I love you and you love me. Meet me in the shade of the old apple tree. My Eveline, old Eveline. My Eveline, say you'll be mine. Won't you come and let me whisper in your ear? Way down yonder in the old cornfield, for you I pine. Sweeter than the honey to the honeybee. I love you and you love me. Meet me in the shade of the old apple tree. My revival.
Oh boy.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Now, which one are we not doing on this?
No, we're doing it.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's several pages.
No, you're all right.
Okay.
Okay, ready? Oh, goodbye, my Coney Island baby. Farewell, my old true love, true love. I'm gonna go away and leave you. Never to see you any.
Never going to see you any.
I'm gonna sail upon that ferry boat, never to return again. So goodbye,
Farewell.
so long forever. Goodbye, my Coney Island.
Goodbye,
Goodbye, my Coney Island. Goodbye, my Coney Island. We all go for some girl that dresses neat, some girl that's got big feet. We meet her on the street, then we'll join the army of married boobs to the altar,
Just like bleeding lambs to slaughter.
when it's over. Oh boy, we get it good. Bachelor days we then recall. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, doctor, lawyer, merchant, chief. We all are bound for
want to see you any.
I'm gonna sail upon that ferry boat, never to return again. So goodbye,
Farewell.
so long forever.
Goodbye,
Goodbye, my Coney Island. Goodbye, my Coney Island. Goodbye, my Coney Island.
Bye, bye.